welcome everybody. We've been chatting here because the meeting starts at 10 o'clock, and we want to welcome you. Oops. Uh-oh. Sorry, guys.
What happened?
I shouldn't be clicking too many things here. I lost us. Oh, good morning, everyone. So glad to have you here. In case you don't know, I'm Jan Soule, and I'm the president because nobody else will do this.
Because you're the greatest.
Okay, and our on screen, you will see Wendy Bruquinski. Raise your hand, Wendy. Say something hello. Wendy is our first VP, and actually this whole idea of having Friday forums when we're being forced to shelter in place was her idea, and we think that's great. And Lisa Seago, raise your hand. She's got her flag.
Hi everyone.
Lisa is our treasurer, and amongst other things, our membership chairman. She does a whole lot to keep us going. And so we're really glad you're here. And you will notice that you don't see Steve Frank's picture up here.
Yeah.
Steve will be joining us at 10:15. Yeah, he had an unscheduled thing happen yesterday where they asked him if he would stay on his radio show and talk about
the recall, right? You're talking about
the recall. So he's right now on the radio talking about the recall. And in fact, Steve, Tom Del Vaccaro, and I think Tony Strickland, is that who it is? I have a group started to raise money to fund the recall because the two previous recalls didn't go anywhere. Well, first there were two recalls, but only one was really a recall. The other one hadn't gone through and filed its papers. So we actually have a real recall, and they're trying to raise money. You need money because you need to pay for paid signature gatherers to make it happen. And so that's where he is on the radio. So we'll do a few introductory things. We do have the first whack at all the propositions. So thank you for joining us this morning. And
Steve asked us if we'd go over the propositions real quick before he gets here. So he sent out a list to Jan yesterday.
So Steve, and as Ken Olafson sent us an email, Steve had posted the list of propositions in his California Political Review
Which,
today.
by the way, we're still supposed to be advertising for him, right?
Yes,
Let people
California
know that they
Political
really
Review.
should. Yeah.
It's good.
Hey, sign up for it. If you really want to know what's happening in California,
Yeah.
Free.
where are you going to get it? How are you going to know? There's, it's at least six days a week. Steve sends out his email, all the stuff that's happening in the state. That's where we learned about first, the $2 billion mask deal that Newsom did with a Chinese communist company that was going out of business producing electric vehicles, and he did a deal with them. So your taxpayer dollars are keeping a Chinese communist company in business. I hope you're thankful to Gavin Newsom about that. So we do have two other events coming up. We have on July 10th, we're having a panel discussion on COVID-19, fact, fiction, fairness. And we have two panelists. Wendy, do you want to say anything about our two panelists that are going to be with us next Friday?
Oh, yeah, we've got Mike Rogers, and we've got our local star, Paulette Altmaier, who's actually put some expensive ads in the back page of the Mercury News on, come on, let's get on with opening this up.
Right. One letter to Cody and one
If
letter.
I can say something here, I've got OAN in the background here. I shouldn't, but herd immunity studies show that 30% of humans have the COVID antibodies, and the herd immunity starts at 50%. So we're getting close to herd immunity anyway. It's really time to start thinking about it. But Fauci, Lisa, says that MSM doesn't put that number out. Wow. Anyway, sorry for that little diversion.
Oh no! There has to be herd immunity. I think a lot more people have it than they know. The thing is, we'll talk about that other crap next week. So join us July 10th. All right.
That's next week. That'll be an interesting one.
That'll be fascinating. And then really cool, July 22nd. We've got Timothy Snowball from Pacific Legal Foundation, and he's going to talk about the U.S. Constitution versus the COVID-19 lockdowns. How can we fight back? I'm sure you'll all want to hear that. And he's great attorney. I mean, he's great. So we hope you will join us. That'll be like a regular SVARW meeting, and that'll be on a Wednesday. Okay, speaking of propositions, don't you hate to see all those 20 billion propositions on your ballot? You won't be disappointed at our next election. So until Steve comes, I'm going to ask Wendy, can you talk about some of these propositions? Look at them all. I mean, can you wade through all this?
This is only the beginning of the list, too. Apparently, there's more to come. And let me share my screen here. What happened when Steve said that the propositions were out there? I went and looked on the Secretary of State's website, and what it's come down to is this, it's almost a dozen propositions that they have that are ready for the ballot now. They've all been authorized, and you'll find them on your November ballot. So what you're looking at right now is the start of our voter guide. I'll be fleshing this out, making sure I have everything on it, whatever, when the time comes. But to go through the list here, Proposition 14. And by the way, some of these are so sad because they're just fixing the bills that they've already put in place, which were not, they were misguided to begin with. Anyway, Prop 14 is authorizing another $5.5 billion in bonds, which we never like to do, for stem cell research. It's to continue state-sponsored stem cell research, which to me is not a healthy thing because it really should come from private or federal. And there's something, this synopsis doesn't add it down there, but there's something that says that they are going to hide and only use in California the results of this stem cell research. That's craziness. I mean, why would we do that to ourselves? Anyway, that's Prop 14. Prop 15 is, this is the really bad one that you want to be careful of. This is the one, and look how it starts out. It increases funding for K through 12 public schools by requiring that commercial and industrial real property be taxed based on the current market value. And believe me, if you think you're soaking the big guy by doing this, this is only the beginning, because the next part, this is the split roll they're talking about, the next part's going to be coming after your house and doubling your property tax from 1.25% to 2.5%, 1.25% to 2.5% of the value of the house. And you got to be careful of this one. This is the start of the repeal of the Howard Jarvis Prop 13. So I definitely recommend that one. Recommend voting against that one. Okay, Prop 16, they call it government preferences. And seriously, you got to read this. It repeals Prop 209, which was put in place in 1996. Prop 209 prohibited the state from discriminating against or granting preferential treatment to any individual group on the basis, individual or group, on the basis of race, sex, color, ethnicity, national origin, whatever. They are repealing the law against discriminating. This is crazy. And this is all because apparently there are, when you actually do it on merits, there are way too many Asian and, white kids that make it into schools because we aren't dealing with this stuff at the base of the problem, which is helping the kids from the beginning of the system.
Well, it's
really,
affirmative action is what they're trying to.
it is. It's repealing affirmative action.
Yeah. Or
Yeah, it's pathetic. Okay, Prop 17. The California Constitution, and by the way, they call it disqualification of electors. This is where if you go to prison and you're out on parole, you can't vote. This says that, oh yeah, you can vote if you're on parole. We're fine with that. It still apparently hasn't allowed the ones in prison to vote or the ones that are found to be incompetent. I'm sure that one will pass. I don't know. Anyway, Prop 18, this is voting age. This is kind of a silly thing. What they want to do here is any kid who is 17 but will be 18 by the time the general election rolls around, they get to vote. Whatever.
Steve is here now.
Yeah,
Hi,
exactly.
Steve.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll let Wendy finish her list. Okay, go ahead, Wendy.
Okay, Prop 19. This is the Home Protection Act for seniors and severely disabled. What this essentially does is, you remember a few years back, they said that you can pass on your property base to, you can buy yourself another house within the counties that reciprocate in the state. What this does is it says that the first $1 million can be transferred to a child or a grandchild, but only that $1 million for either a house or a farm, a family farm. But it says that that kid can't take that house as a rent or an income producing property. They have to actually make that their primary residence. It also establishes something they call the California Fire Response Fund, and it also establishes the County Revenue Protection Fund. And the California Fire Response Fund is that they want to put money towards people who have lost their houses, so that now we're going to fund fire suppression techniques. And the County Revenue Protection Fund just is a smear of it to make sure that everybody, all the counties are behind it, so that if you're going to lose money from it, you still can get money from it. Okay, the last line's the important one. Any remaining balance transfers to the general fund. That's the whole point behind it. Okay, Prop 20 restricts parole for nonviolent offenders. This is where they are going to start calling a felony somebody that steals something. You know, that $950 where you can run into Target, rob them for up to almost $1,000, and it's not even a misdemeanor, so they don't even bother trying to catch you. This is pulling back on that. Finally, they've come to their senses that this is indeed increasing crime, and now they're going to make it so that it authorizes felony charges for some thefts and crimes where the value is between $250. So it essentially rolls it down to $250. I mean, you can run into a 7-Eleven and steal something now, but you can't run into Macy's and steal something. This is craziness. Anyway, that's Prop 20. Prop 21 expands local government's authority to enact rent control. Well, we all know what I think of rent control. Every time you get rent control, everyone goes to the max as soon as they possibly can. Anyway, Prop 22 changes employment classification rules for you remember that AB5 that everyone was having a fit about because suddenly all the Uber drivers and the Lyft drivers had to become employees, along with all of the carve-outs that they didn't make for hair salons and whatnot. And like Lisa's husband supposedly has to become an employee. They did some carve-outs so that doctors actually didn't have to become employees, although they tried to keep nurses as employees. I don't know if they actually got their carve-out. But what this does is it carves out your Uber and Lyft drivers, so now they don't have to be employees. This whole AB5 is just a disaster, and I don't know why they don't repeal the whole thing, but they're doing a carve-out now for drivers and delivery people. Crazy. Prop 23 authorizes state regulation of, you remember the kidney dialysis thing that was on the ballot last time that passed, of course. Now this requires at least one licensed physician on site, which was in the original bill, but now you can get an exception if you can't find a licensed physician, to where you have a nurse practitioner or a PA on site. Another fix for another bad bill. Prop 24 amends consumer privacy laws. This one actually might be good. I haven't read the whole thing carefully, but it permits consumers to prevent businesses from sharing personal information. So there might be something good come of that. I don't know. Prop 25, referendum to overturn a 2018 law that replaced the money bail system with a system based on public risk. This is like our bad boys bail bonds friends will maybe like this, but the craziness is they're not repealing that. What this says is if a petition is signed by the required number of registered voters, they have to put a petition out and get it signed and filed. They're going to put a referendum on the next statewide ballot requiring a majority of voters to approve the 2018 state law before it can take effect. And the 2018 law replaces the money bail system with a system where a judge can say, I don't think you're really a threat. You don't need to post bail for that murder you committed. So go on out of here and just come back when your court date is. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what's on the ballot so far.
And thanks to the list Steve Frank provided.
Oh, Steve is here.
And Steve's here, his Capital Political Review. And if you're not subscribing, you should. So good to see you, Frank. And Steve. This has been a traumatic day. Anyway, thank you, Steve, for coming. And I will turn the meeting over to Wendy to introduce you.
And of course, he needs no introduction. We love having Steve join us, and we're hoping he's going to continue joining us here in the future as often as he possibly can. And by the way, I hope I represented those bills okay, because a lot of that really is fixing bad bills. I don't know, it's kind of crazy. Anyway, make sure if you would to join the California Political Review team. We love his newsletter that comes out as often as he does, like 6 days a week. It's really good. Anyway, with no further ado, please welcome Steve Frank.
Wendy, thank you very much for the intro. Day by day and hour by hour, the situation changes. What I'd like to do today is just have a quick discussion on the California budget for calendar year, for fiscal year 2020-2021. And there's and AB 5 is the law that says that if you are working in the gig economy and you want to work an hour or two a week or an hour or two a day, you're allowed to, because that's freedom. Under the state of California, there is no freedom to work. You have to be employed by a company with full benefits, which means you're not going to work. Last week, Uber announced that if AB 5 is not repealed, at least for their portion of it, that if it's not repealed, 158,000 people will lose their jobs. 158,000 people in just one company. In total, over 1 million Californians will lose their jobs. Now, you can't say that Governor Newsom doesn't really believe in unemployment. He has in the budget an extra $20 million to sue companies that hire people that aren't being given full benefits and they only want to work a few hours a day or a few hours a week. He wants to use your tax dollars to make sure more people are unemployed and more people have to go on unemployment and welfare. That is the Newsom budget. But there's also a couple of other parts to it. There's a $10 million micro grant in the budget for illegal aliens so they can start businesses. Now, I want you to think about what that means. So he's taking people who are breaking our federal laws, who are breaking our immigration laws, criminals from foreign countries, and he is going to give your tax dollars to them so they could start businesses to be in competition with honest taxpayers who are here honestly doing honest work so they can have their own business in competition using California tax dollars. Then if that doesn't give the illegal aliens enough help, he also has an increased what's called an earned income tax credit. An earned income tax credit is where you don't earn enough money to pay income taxes, and they want you to have some money anyway, so they make it a credit, and the government gives you money. And he has added illegal aliens to that list, that even though they're here illegally, even though they're supposed to be deported, even though they're violating federal law, and even though federal law says anybody that assists an illegal alien or encourages an illegal alien to stay here is guilty of a felony, the state budget proposed by Newsom, passed by the Democrats, not merely encourages illegal aliens to stay here, but to also get money for not earning enough money to be here illegally. Then there is another portion of the budget dealing with education. As we all know, education has, which we knew before was a government education was a failure, now it barely exists. And now the CTA, the California Teachers Association, the NEA, the National Educators Association, have all admitted that the so-called distance learning provided the last few months to our students has been an utter failure. They want the kids back on campus. Well, we all do, and I agree with those two unions on that. But here's the problem. The governor's not going to allow that. The superintendent of public instruction is not going to allow that. In most districts in the state, the districts are going to have students on campus 2 days a week. And in the elementary grades, those 2 days are not full days. The full days are only half days. And so what's happening is that the school districts would not get their normal average daily attendance, their ADA, and they'll lose a whole lot of money, more than half of the money. So Governor Newsom came up with a bill called AB 77, which was incorporated into the budget. And what that means is that it doesn't matter if no students attend a school district or a classroom. It means if no student attends classes 5 days a week, but only 2 days a week, the school district will receive full payment of ADA as if it was February 2020 when they had real attendance at schools. And so schools are going to be paid for students that don't exist, and for students that don't attend classes, and for students that do no work. And that's how the state's going to pay for the next year for our school districts. In other words, they have closed down the schools, but the school districts, the unions that run them, will continue to get fully paid for doing much less work. The bigger problem for the school districts, of course, is that statewide, about 20% of the students have not been heard from since March. In Los Angeles Unified, 40% of the students have not been heard from since March. And what does the term heard from mean? That at least once a week on a conference call or a Zoom, the student showed up to talk for a few minutes. That's all it took for them to get their so-called education. And the reality is it doesn't work that way. And so our school system is going to get paid fully. Our students will get no education for another year, and they're going to say, we did our job. Now, the budget goes a little bit further. We've seen the civil unrest in our state and in our nation. We've seen this effort to defund the police. No one has mentioned that Gavin Newsom, through the budget, is also defunding law enforcement in the state of California. State of California in the budget gives a large sum of money to local police departments and sheriff's departments, as well as the California Highway Patrol. He has cut the law enforcement budget from the state by 26%, by 1/4. That means that local police departments, sheriff's departments, and the CHP will not be able to have as many personnel, not have the updated equipment, and not be able to pursue investigations. How bad is that? Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors just passed a budget for the Sheriff's Department of LA County, and they cut $150 million from the budget of the Sheriff's Department. And they did this by cutting several sections of the responsibility of the Sheriff's Department. What were those sections? Sex trafficking, domestic violence, gang task force. These are part of the work of the LA Sheriff's Department that will no longer be done. In other words, LA County is now freely open for gangs. It's freely open for domestic violence, and sex traffickers don't have to worry about law enforcement stopping them from abusing women from the United States and those they bring in from other countries. That is what defunding the police means. It also means that Los Angeles and the other cities and counties that use state money won't have enough money to hire all the police officers they need to keep us safe. At the same time, the budget of the state is used for the first time as a policy statement, which is not supposed to be. It's merely an economic statement of expenditures and revenues expected and to be delivered. Instead, they have made it much more difficult using the budget for people to buy weapons, for people to buy ammunition, put more regulations on both of those, and they're using the budget to do it. And there was no discussion whatsoever of that proposal. And the Democrats just voted for it. So to summarize the budget, great deal of aid to illegal aliens, a lot of money that should go to the police departments and law enforcement is being taken away. Our ability to protect ourselves is being taken away. The education of our children is no longer a priority. And the budget is a statement of a totalitarian future that we are about to face. Now, let me talk about a different subject that faces us every day, and we hear our politicians sometimes weasel out. The League of Counties notice to every city asking them to pass a resolution, and your city, whether it be Danville or San Ramon or Chico or Lafayette, any city has been told by the League of Cities to pass a resolution promoting and defending and thanking Black Lives Matter. Now, when I say Black Lives Matter, I'm talking with a capital B, capital L, capital M, which is the Marxist movement to create violence and chaos in our society. And the League of Cities is promoting this. I know this because in Simi Valley, where I live, our city council now has that resolution created by the League of Cities in front of it. And let me suggest that there's an answer to it. And the answer is, we believe that Black Lives Matter, not with a capital B, not with a capital L or a capital M, but with a small BLM. Black Lives Matter. All lives matter. Black Lives Matter as a movement, as an organization, is one that is based on civil disorder, Marxist economics, violence, and bigotry and hatred that would make the KKK pale. And so we need to separate the issue of Black Lives Matter from that of Black Lives Matters, the movement. And once we do that, we can get back to a reasonable discussion as to what needs to be done to bring equality and equity to all Californians, to all Americans, regardless of color. And that really needs to be where we go in the future on this discussion. And this is a discussion we're going to have for a long while. And some people say, well, Steve, when is this Black Lives Matter movement going to end? When is the COVID crisis going to end? Now, I know you all have your calendars in front of you. Take out your calendars and mark the date that I'm going to give you when both movements end. And that date is November 4th. Once the presidential election is over, all of a sudden, everything will be over. There won't be any more COVID crises. There won't be any more Black Lives Matters movement crises. They will have been solved by an election one way or the other. Now, let me note something about the COVID that disturbs me greatly. As you know, we're being told that we're having these massive outbreaks of the COVID virus. That is a bunch of garbage. That's not true. What we do have, last Sunday, the state of California had approximately 106,000 tests given. On Tuesday, a couple of days ago, we had 105,000 tests given in a single day. It's not a question of an outbreak, it's a question of testing. We already knew that folks had the COVID virus and nothing was going on, no seriousness to it. But using the testing system as an event to say that this is a problem, while it does solve the problem of testing so we know who has it, it doesn't solve the problem of where it's coming from. When you go into the numbers, like they have in Imperial County was shut down last week because of a massive outbreak in Imperial County because the large number of people with the COVID virus. But when you look at who those people were, you found out they came from two populations, mostly from a state prison in Imperial County and from senior homes in Imperial County. Everybody else was good, but they closed down a whole county because they didn't want to protect the prisoners and they didn't want to protect the elderly. So a whole county was closed down because the government failed to do its job. And we see this in county after county. The majority of the cases are coming now from seniors and from the prison population, and the government does nothing about it. Then you have a third population that is getting the coronavirus, which to them is as bad as the flu, and those are those from 20 to 40 who have said, we don't care, we're going to survive all this, I've had the cold, I want a job, I want a life, and they go out and they do things. And isn't it amazing that the governor, who threatened to arrest pastors for opening up the prisons, has arrested nobody for all the protests and riots around the state that had thousands of people involved? So we're in a quandary here, which goes to why we need to recall Gavin Newsom. RecallGavin2020.com is where you get the petitions for the recall. We have a governor that really doesn't care. But I got some great news. He has already been recalled. The Democrat Party of California has recalled Gavin Newsom as the leader of their party. They do not want him to lead the party. They don't trust him anymore. And here's the proof. Last weekend, the Democrat delegates to the National Democrat Convention held a meeting, and traditionally the governor, who is the top Democrat official in the state, is the leader of the delegation. Instead, they overthrew him, wouldn't allow him because they said they don't trust him, and they put in Congressman Ro Hanna from the Silicon Valley, and I'm sure you know him, as the chair of the convention, of the delegation, who, as you know, was the chair of the Sanders campaign in California. Barbara Lee Jackson from Alameda, the congresswoman, who's a friend of Fidel Castro's, or was a friend of Fidel Castro's, and is a open Marxist. She's the co-chair, along with Hilda Solis, the supervisor from LA County, who was an Obama administration cabinet member, who earlier this week voted to get rid of the gang task force, human trafficking, and domestic violence task force of the LA County sheriffs. And she's the moderate of the group. Notice one thing: no white males. The Democrat Party apparently, in this state and elsewhere, is on a jihad against white males in office and in positions of power. In 2018, AOC defeated a socialist Democrat, Joe Crowley, but he was white and a male. Last week in New York, in the Democrat primary, a black socialist got rid of Elliot Engel, who is a black Jewish male. And in 2022, the Democrats, the progressive Democrats, the AOC Democrats, are going to go after two candidates. One, Gerald Nadler, who is a white male Jew in Congress. And AOC, if I was a betting person, I've never bought a lottery ticket, is going to run for the U.S. Senate against Chuck Schumer. AOC has already raised over $10 million in her political accounts, and she's raising much more. In the last quarter, she outraised Nancy Pelosi, and she also has several PACs besides this. She'll have all the money she needs to overthrow Chuck Schumer. So on one hand, I say, yay, we get rid of Chuck Schumer. On the other hand, we get a Marxist bigot who hates people based on their race and gender, uses people, and wants to kill our economy, both in New York, California, and nationwide. So this is a movement to be watched. And here in California, you're going to see more and more challenges. How bad is it? Even Nancy Pelosi has an opponent, either an Indian or Pakistani American, who is running against her, who in the primary got 30% of the vote. And who endorsed him? AOC endorsed a candidate against the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. We are seeing what I call an ethnic cleansing by the progressive wing of the Democrat Party. So we're in for some really interesting times. I'm about to do a story in my newsletter that was mentioned before, an op-ed piece called The Civil War We Are In. And we are now in a civil war. For years, we've seen the cancel culture take on the news media and kill off the news media. The entertainment industry has become a propaganda industry against freedom, rights, in support of bigotry and hatred and violence against those who want to be successful and free. Our schools have been used as indoctrination centers. Now we are seeing nationwide pockets of civil unrest where the violent people are just being allowed to be violent and take over sections of towns, tear down public property, destroy public property, spit on cops with nothing being done. We watched on TV police officers in Chicago, Minneapolis, Oakland, Los Angeles, watching looters steal and burn buildings and cars and loot from retail stores and grocery stores. And nothing is being done by the police who were watching this all being done. We no longer have a police force. Since March, 8.9 million guns have been sold in the United States. The month of June saw the largest number of requests for registration analysis to make sure people could buy their guns. That the registration process has gotten that large. Historic. 2.5 million guns were sold in the month of May. And every month has been a historic high in the sales of guns. We are in the middle of a civil war, like it or not, whether or not we want to admit it. We are there. You know, sometimes when you read the history books, you say, gee, didn't they understand what was going on around them at the time? And the folks living it just couldn't believe it. They were so shell-shocked, so awed by it all, they didn't put it all together. Well, I'm putting it together. We are in the middle of a civil war. And it's not polite, it's not respectful, and it's dangerous. And that's what we are in as we face tomorrow, Independence Day, a remembrance of where we come from. And in fact, there's a movement to get rid of July 4th because it is a vision of white supremacy, as the Black Lives Matter movement says, as to why July 4th has to be taken off the books. But they do want June 19th, as a national holiday, forgetting that June 19th was an effort by Abraham Lincoln, a Republican, to end slavery. And who were the slaveholders but the Democrats? And so there is a disjointed understanding of history, and they have totally wiped out the facts of history that don't fit their model, that to fit their Marxist movement. And so we have to remind folks what July 4th is about, and we have to remind them that June 19th is a celebration of what Lincoln and the Republicans did for Black Americans. And that's where we are, July 3rd, 2020 in California. It's a sad situation. My good friend, and I think yours as well, Tom DeBaccaro, he likes to introduce me as Dr. Doom and Gloom. I prefer to use the words of Harry Truman. Harry Truman said, I don't give them hell, I tell the truth and they think it's hell. We're not going to solve the problems of today by laughing it off, by saying it doesn't matter. This too shall pass. It won't hurt us to listen to the other side. It is time for us to act. And the first act we have is the recall of Gavin Newsom to send a message. The second act is to register people and get them out to vote in November to make sure that honest, decent people are elected to office, whether that office is Congress or city council or school board. Every office counts. So I'll open up for questions, but it's imperative that we not do this every first Friday of the month and then go back to what we're doing and say we've done our job by going on this Zoom broadcast. It is what we do in between the broadcasts that counts. Registering voters, helping candidates, going to town halls, talking to your neighbors, going to on radio shows, letters to the editor, letters to the elected officials. All of this is important. And so having these Zoom conferences are great, but this is the starting point, not the ending point of our activism. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Doom. It is scary times that we live in. Okay, I had a question for you to start with. I have heard from actually Candace Owens. She says that every dollar that gets donated to BLM actually goes to Act Blue. Have you heard that, and is that true?
Well, I do know this, that the Minnesota Freedom Fund, which was BLM, collected $35 million since the George Floyd murder. And the purpose of the $35 million was to bail people out of jail for rioting. Of the $35 million, $200,000 was spent on bail money, and the rest was spent on consultants, travel, studies, and all sorts of other things. And that's just one BLM fund. And I'll give you an example. They are crony capitalists. They are grifters in the pure sense of the word. They use a cause to collect money so they could live the high life. I hope the IRS and the DOJ goes into further, because it appears, and I'm only saying it appears, that also money from these accounts are being used to buy weapons. And I think we saw that in Seattle, because there was a large number of weapons in the sovereign state of crop, as they call it. You know, the sovereign nation, I should say. The only thing they didn't do is ask for membership in the UN.
That's hilarious. Lisa, did you have a question?
Well, I was looking at what some of our attendees have been asking as far as on the Recall Newsom. Who would replace Newsom?
Let me explain the process. We have till November 17th to get enough signatures, 1.5 million verified signatures, to put the recall on the ballot. And I won't go into the time frame, but based on the time frame under the law, the election to recall him will be in late winter, early spring, February or March, in all probability. On the ballot will be two questions. First question, and these, there'll be no ballot measures on there, no candidates on there, strictly two questions. First questions: shall Gavin Newsom be recalled from as governor? Yes or no? And that's how you'll vote: yes or no. Should he be recalled? Second question: if Gavin Newsom is recalled from office, who shall replace him? If you remember, in 2003, there were 132 candidates on the recall ballot to replace Gray Davis. And you do not need a majority vote to become governor in a recall. 22% can get you elected as governor of California. So that when the question comes, who's going to replace him, I will not tell you or give you any ideas as to who should replace him, because it's not about John Jones or Bill Smith becoming the governor. It's about getting rid of Gavin Newsom first. Once we get to November 18th, the day after the recall has qualified, November 18th, that is when we should be discussing who our candidate should be. Because I don't want anybody to use the recall, well, you know, Bill Smith wants to be governor and he's supporting it, and therefore this is a Bill Smith for governor operation. I'm not going to help Bill Smith. I don't like him. Well, we don't want to get into that situation. This is not a problem of Republicans being hurt in California or Democrats being hurt in California by Gavin Newsom. 40 million Californians have been hurt by Gavin Newsom. This isn't a Republican or a Democrat issue. It's a California issue. And until November 17th, we have to keep it that way.
Very true.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so now November 17th is just to get it to next, like 2021?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. And now Ari Goldberg types, it's not crop, Steve, it's chop. As the chop leader said on a video, we're going to bring out the guillotines and chop their heads off. Yikes, this is scary.
And actually they did have a guillotine. They made a guillotine. You know, it's kind of like the French Revolution. But what happened in the French Revolution? If you remember those revolutionaries, what happened to guillotine? The guy who created the guillotine, he got his head chopped off. They literally went after each other, and eventually the BLM movement is going to implode, and they'll go after each other, calling themselves revisionists, capitalists. They will start saying they are tools of the establishment. And when it comes out how much money the BML leaders skimmed off of this thing, the real believers are going to say, off with their heads. And as far as I'm concerned, let them fight it out among themselves.
True, very true. But Kevin Golden types that last night in Portland, there was a mortar attack at a justice center that houses a police station.
They have great weapons, unfortunately. And a lot of them know how to use them. Many have been in the military, so they know how to use mortars and hand grenades. And sadly enough, remember what I said before about the LA County trying to getting rid of its gang task force? All over the state, counties are getting rid of their gang task force and not cooperating with the state in keeping a list of gang members. Literally, California is gang territory now. And these folks know how to buy weapons out of Mexico that are brought up here, or steal from armories, National Guard armories here in the state and in the nation. They know how to make weapons. They are bringing weapons into the country, and they're illicit. You and I, if we have a gun, we register it. They just laugh at the idea of registration. Who cares? No one's going to do anything to them. They know that. And so we're legal. And the bigger problem is, as the fewer cops arrive, the easier it is for these people to do home invasions, to know where people have guns and steal their guns, because the cops aren't going to do anything. Because in today's world, if a cop chases a criminal in the act of a crime, it's the cop that goes to jail. And they know it. And so they're not going to do anything more than stop in the name of the law and hope you have a good day.
Yeah. Dave Westerman wants to know if there's ever going to be a federal lawsuit against Newsom for aiding and abetting the illegal aliens. Do you think Bill Barr will ever do anything about that?
In the second term, yes. In the second term, I think they will stop the funding of California.
All sanctuary states, hopefully.
Or all sanctuary states until they do it. Now, it's interesting. It's really interesting, the duplicity and hypocrisy of Gavin Newsom. So Gavin Newsom decides he's not going to enforce our federal immigration laws because we're a sovereign state, right? On the other hand, he announced in the budget, and it's in the budget, $2.5 billion that goes to local government agencies, counties. If you don't obey the governor's rules on masks, on lockdowns, and all the other rules he says, he's going to withhold your money. So he can withhold money from your city, but he doesn't want the feds to withhold money from our state. Is that hypocrisy or what?
With a capital H. Oh, that is pathetic. Lisa, are you finding something out there?
I'm trying to figure out who. Got a lot coming in here. So.
Yeah, and they overlap sometimes.
Yes. Let's see. Someone's asking what the response should the GOP have in the time of unrest?
Yeah, how come they're not standing up?
I think the Republican Party needs to take a strong stand against civil unrest, in favor of Black Lives Matter, with a small b, small l, small m, and all lives matter, and show the hypocrisy and bigotry. And the one thing I wish they would do, the one thing, is to point out a comparative. All the things the Republican Party has done from the days of Lincoln on behalf of equality and freedom, and all the things the Democrat Party has done to create slavery, Jim Crow laws, the KKK. And if Black Lives Matter, with a small b, l, m, if Black Lives Matter, then we should be closing down abortion clinics because the majority of those aborted are children of color. In New York City, there are more black babies aborted than born.
Wow.
That is genocide.
It is. It is.
Wow. Okay, Diane McWilliams says that she just followed you on Twitter. So,
Thank you.
But you don't have lots of followers there. So we need to up your campaign on Twitter, right?
I have 4,400 Twitter followers.
Okay.
It's at CA Political News.
At CA Political News.
At
Okay.
CA Political News on Twitter. I have approximately 4,500 people following me. Obviously, I want more. I also have a Facebook page, and I usually put up one posting a day with some thoughts. As you can tell, I have crazy thoughts, and so I put those
I love them.
more rational ones up on Facebook and Twitter. But I appreciate anybody that follows. I also appreciate anybody that goes to capoliticalreview.com and signs up for a free subscription. 6 days a week, 3 a.m. in the morning, and you'll get the news that the mainstream won't give you.
Okay. And somebody's asking, do you have an email address that you take comments from?
Oh, you could either do it two ways. One, you could, if you're commenting on an article in my newsletter, there's a process there. You just click on it and you could do that. Otherwise, you can reach me directly at Stephen Frank, StephenFrank at sbcglobal.net. And I get about 1,000 emails a day, and I respond to all of them.
Oh, very
Wow.
cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Always very interesting. And Jan is back. The boss is here.
I hate that word. Oh, Steve, you are great. And I will tell you, Steve responds to his email. I don't think Steve sleeps because if I had to get out the California Political Review 6 days a week and answer all my calls and do all that and be on the radio, and Lord knows what else you do.
Sleep is for wimps.
And we appreciate that. Hey, I want to just say two comments, Steve. Steve said, it's great to get on these Friday forums. It's great to go to SVARW meetings. It's great to do all that. But unless you do something in between, this is nothing. So we have an election coming up in 4 months. There is a great need to flip 7 House seats in the state of California that are flippable. There's the need for people to be calling in to the states that are up for grabs. When you are asked and you get an email that says volunteer, you need to do that, or else don't cry about it. Besides that, there are almost 200 nonpartisan seats up for election in Santa Clara County. If you're interested, send me an email. You can go to our website. You can see about that. There's school boards, but there's stuff like Santa Clara County Regional Open Space and Mid-Peninsula Open Space. Plus, there's all these city and county boards and commissions. You know, you can influence the government. And we were just talking about this. In San Jose, there's a whole bunch of neighborhood commission seats, right? And these commissions advise the city council. We need Republicans on all 10 district neighborhood commissions in San Jose to advise the city council that we don't want to defund the police. You could at least do that. There's tons to do. Plus, one other thing about the recall, it's on the SVARW website. There talks about the recall. You can download the petition, 5 signatures, download it. And somebody said, I got an email from somebody who said, I don't have 4 other conservatives that'll sign this. You can just download it, sign the circulating information that you circulated to yourself and send it in. They'll be happy to get that. Okay? So even if you're 2 people at home and you can't go social distance and ask anybody else, just sign it and sign the circulating stuff and send it in. Thank you. And thank you so much, Steve. We truly appreciate it.
Well, always glad to be with you. It's a good opportunity to just give a download as to what's going on. But the most important part is using the information. Information without action is wasteful. Action without information is fanaticism. And so we need to both have the information, but then act on it.
Thank you so much, Steve. We really appreciate it. All of our Friday forums and meetings, they'll be online within a couple of days. So if you heard something and you go, what did Steve say about the budget? Oh my God. And defunding the police and the 26% that Newsom, that's the first time I heard this, took out of the budget to away from law enforcement. You can go back and listen to it, and then you could forward the link to your friends. So that's another way to get the word out. So thank you so much, Steve, and we look forward to hearing from you again.
Have a great 4th.
You too. Thank you all.
You too.
Thank you all
Thank
for
you.
coming.
And don't forget, next week, we have our COVID panel coming in, COVID-19. They're going to be talking about what we see in the county versus what's happening with the shutdown in the county. Craziness. Hope to see you then.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.